year and a half ago, actually a bit more than that, but we invited Pablo for a virtual residency in March 2021. During that residency, Pablo was a guest professor. Oh, thank you. Pablo was a guest professor in Mark Sussman's design class. He was also a guest professor in Luis Sotelo class as well. We had talks, a keynote address, and many conversations with various colleagues. We kept thinking one day, Pablo will be able to come to Montreal and be here in person, and thankfully the pandemic has allowed this. There's a bit of a lull, so welcome. Pablo Guerchanik, for context, is an actor, a director, a professor. He's a graduate of the École Internationale de Théâtre Jacques Lecoq, and he's been an actor touring internationally for Cirque Éloise, Compagnie Philippe Gentry, Compagnia Finzi Pasca, and has directed theater and co-directed one of the Sept Doigts de la Main Fibonacci projects. I think that's how we met.
That's how we met.
That was the connection.
Exactly.
That's right. He taught physical theater, clown, and object theater for over 20 years in Mexico, Argentina, and France. At the National University of San Martin in Buenos Aires, he created and has been directing the specialization in performance and interpretation with masks. He is currently an artist affiliated with the Centre 4 Paris and Cité Internationale des Arts de Paris, and currently here at Concordia, obviously. There's some feedback. I can hear myself thank you. Yeah. Technical difficulties. Pablo, this morning, so we have a session where you'll be presenting your intimate models methodology, and also then turning over to an actual maquette that was built over the weekend. So you animated a workshop with participants from Concordia, Milena Pereira, Javiera Osorio Gigliotto, Gabriela Torchia, Bonnie Harnden as well. Not everyone could be there today, but we have 3 of them, so you'll be able to talk through the maquette with them. I'll sit down in a moment. Could you tell us a bit about what this intimate maquette methodology is?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much, Patrick, and thanks to Concordia, the Fourth Space, to host all these dialogues that have been happening since a long while and that now have like this possibility of being in presence. Intimate Models Lab has to do with that, with what could mean to be sharing a space with other people. It's a project that starts from a personal quest in a way that has to do with reconstructing a personal story linked to what happened in our country, in Argentina, during the 70s. As you know, Argentina, as most of the countries of South America and most of the Latin America countries, had suffered dictatorships and brutal repressions during the 70s. So that created a kind of initial space of symbolic quests in 3 generations, in the generations of our grandparents, in the generations of our parents, and finally in our generation. Our generation grew up with heroes, with martyrs, with big epic images, and it was very important for us to be able not just to deal with the statues that our parents or our heroes represented in that utopic model they fought for, but also to construct real human beings. And my question was at the beginning, what does it mean to reconstruct a tragic event or a person, an epic person, for a community, for a family, for a society? And I had the possibility of being invited by a museum of memory. During the 70s, this place used to be the most important concentration camp of the Americas. Important part of the repression happened in this place. Many people died, and well, many stories that I think that most of the people know of what happened in Argentina and in South America. But this space became a museum. And for me, the fact of being there and being invited to reconstruct in a way, or to be in a residency there, and to reply through this experience by constructing a piece of work, a piece of art, was very important. So my question was, okay, how do you reconstruct? So my first intuition was, what happens if you wonder what happened at the same specific moment that your life was changing forever? What happened in the same neighborhood, in the same city, in other cities in the country, in other countries, in terms of everyday life, in terms of big events, in terms of what we call the history with little h and with a big H. This link between the intimate story and the social story. When I think about intimacy, I always think that this notion of intimacy is something that is not just something that is private, but is something that you can share with others. Intimacy is your intimacy and my intimacy, but by gathering, we create a common intimacy, a common space, a third space. So that was the idea at the beginning. So I started creating this model that finally was invited to go to France. And when I arrived to France, presenting my model, my initial model, what happened is that having this dialogue with the French people there, the audience, we started to realize that for them, it was also a very, very particular moment. After the terrorist attacks of 2015 and 16, all this question about what could be the role of the art or the culture to somehow reconstruct this social tie that has been broken by the violence. So that's when I decided to invest a good amount of time, of that time in France, to create this idea of an intimate model slab, which means a space where I open somehow some theatrical tools, some other tools coming from movement, from human rights, from psychology, in order to provide a group coming from different experiences, a space to explore, first in a theatrical way, then in a plastic way, and also in the possibility of sharing a space by moving together, by performing together, and by bringing objects belonging to each and every story coming from all the participants, and to see how all this melting pot can create like a symbolic territory where you can like pull some tools in order to construct a story that will never be a personal story but a social story.
So how do you negotiate the intimacies, the individual intimacies that end up in this collective context, if you have many people working on a common maquette?
I realized by doing these laboratories that two things were very, very important. The first one is to create not direct dialogues. Through the objects, through the creation, something establishes a link between the people creating the models together and between the presentation and the audience. And the second thing is the fact of the group. Nothing happens in loneliness. Something happens when you have the possibility of meeting other stories and having this empathetic process with the other stories. So in this specific case of the laboratory we did in Concordia this weekend, that was the goal, because we had a very short amount of time and because we found by sharing the stories that there was a common path that was very interesting, and you will see now by talking to the creators of the models that this common space started to appear very naturally in a way, and that helped us in a way to imagine that there was no individual models that we wanted to build, but one common model. And also something that for us was very, very interesting was to say, okay, we have two possibilities. Either we rush and we try to finish this model, or we create this kind of draft that is going to let us present that moment of the work in order to talk to you, in order to talk to the audience, and to open through this draft a dialogue with the audience that is today with us.
Thank you. I'm curious to know, how do you, I guess your process comes from trauma, from collective and individual trauma. But you're also giving workshops in environments where there is individual trauma, but we don't necessarily have the same high intensity of traumatic social experience, for instance, in North America. how do you negotiate this? I guess the integration, the presence that different people can, bring into this process, where they haven't necessarily flirted with trauma and flirted in the, or had to experience trauma.
Yeah, I think there are like two instances: the instance of trauma and the instance of drama, and I've realized somehow by talking to the people who create the models, and that drama has no magnitude. Everyone lives his own or her own personal drama in a very, very high intensity level, thinking that this is an epic drama. And that's so valuable and so respectable. So trauma happens in another way. It's the invasion of some other topics that we could discuss later. But for me, what is interesting is by having this space of detaching, of distance, you can start like reimagining the way you relate to the reality. You cannot change perhaps what happened, but you can change the way you deal with that. And so this started by being a space for artists having lived this social trauma to reconstruct, but by enlarging somehow the context of the models in universities, in museums, in schools, in different places, in artistic companies, I've been starting to talk much more about emblematic experiences, which means experiences that have changed your life.
Right. Okay.
It can be something painful, it can be something fantastic, it can be like different experiences, but always with this idea of creating a playground to manipulate and to see what happens if we equalize the story in different ways.
Okay, so there's an externalization and sort of repurposing of experiences through a common emblematic experience and maquette. We have an example here. I'm looking at the maquette and I'm intrigued. Shall we invite our participants?
It's my pleasure.
Yeah,
if
so
you want to join us.
Please come up. Alejandra, Milena, Javiera. And interestingly, I was asking about the language of the workshop, and there was a smattering of Spanish, English, and Portuguese.
Exactly.
Languages you all speak, of course, as well as French and Italian.
Not Portuguese. I would love to.
Oh, okay.
I would love to.
The globetrotter.
Yeah.
You come to Montreal, and it's very Latin American.
It's exactly it.
Yeah.
It's exactly it.
So some of the missing people from the workshop also. There was Bonnie and Gabriella who contributed and can't be here today, unfortunately. But I'll let you lead us through the process, and please, there's a microphone. Please feel free to talk about your own contributions and process. So Pablo, do you want to lead us?
This is a microphone. Yeah. This is a group. This is a model. There's the audience, and I invite you to share a little bit with us of what happened, what could happen. That is also something that for me is important when we create models, is this idea of a possible space to come, of a possible scene to come. It's not just something that we pull from the past, but we were talking a lot about the idea of longing, model as a space of longing. Because longing has this double capacity. You can long for something that has already happened, but you can long for something to come as well. So this can be like a mnemonic in a way of something you would like somehow to be in a particular way, to let someone younger or older to know, in a way to recover something from another generation. And that's something that I think it's present here. So if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I was accompanying the process first from outside. I was taking the documentation of it, and then the second day, Pablo invited me to get in touch with them and with the process. And what I absolutely loved was the fact that we could have conversations around the idea that we were discussing, and then figuring out together and having this care and you know, holding it our hands and trying to figure out how would look like. So we just arrived to creating this table, but at the end it was our table, and all what we discussed about the idea of the table and how it is really it was relevant in certain aspects of our lives with our families. And this very, like, we were discussing a lot about womanhood and how this encounter was so significant for us. And yeah, I don't know if you want to add something.
Maybe can you contextualize for people watching your name, where you're from, and what program you're
Yes.
involved with?
Well, I am Alejandra Jimenez. I am a student in the second year of the Indie program, and trying to get more in the specificities of the humanities. So I am an actress. I was in Colombia. I was part of a group who always approached theater from the outside, like, I mean, street work, like working on streets. And then having this encounter again with Pablo and with this maquette process made me, I was telling to them last session that it made me come to my origins. My origins is, you know, the stage, the theater itself. So it is very nourishing. It was nourishing. And by the way, I'm from Colombia. Yeah, I forgot that. So how it is, want to say?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Javiera. I'm an actress. I came from Chile. Work with Patrick in Concordia. I'm a intern passing student. For me, it's very important because the workshop, in a sense of, it's a very huge experience for an artist, because you can share something it's more bigger than the issue as art. I don't know how can I explain, but it's not only the maquette, it's the experience that came from the maquette. And it's a very place that, and we can say the words, we can explain with words, and it's very concrete all the time. And it's very clear, the process for arrive in the model, with what we can share with the others. And I think the art, it's a tool for everyone, not just only for artists.
Right.
I think it's a very powerful tool, and creativity is the motor,
Engine.
the engine that we can bring, the experience.
And I just want to say, if you want to speak Spanish, we can translate,
Okay.
or French, or Portuguese. I don't know if we can translate.
Yeah.
Sure.
Hello, good morning. My name is Milena. I'm starting the PhD in the humanities here in Concordia. I'm guided by Patrick Leroux. So I'm Brazilian. That's maybe something important to say. That's why they are all talking about Portuguese. Well, I don't know exactly how to put into words what I was thinking about during the workshop, but this experience of sharing a previous experience that might be traumatic in certain aspects with other people who also have this experience, gave me the perception of how this experience how these experiences, well, even being different one from each other, is similar in certain ways, and then realizing that there are some icons, let's say like that, that are that yeah, they are common, like the table. That's how we could get into like the table and some other materials that we started to create the maquette. And then there is also this maybe a duality between what's real and what's imagined. And well, it was interesting to, well, we could develop that more in our bodies, like between each other, with the proposals of Pablo. And then we started to create that also in the maquette. It was so interesting.
Yeah, I think something that guided a little bit the encounter, I had this other one, thank you, was this idea of transposition, which is we didn't mean to bring experiences and to reproduce them in a fictional space or a theatrical space or a plastic space, but this idea of how can we get in touch with an experience but pass it through an aesthetic veil in a way that will somehow detach ourselves in a very personal way of the material that is produced, but is also the possibility of constructing a bridge with an audience. So what for us is important in this model and in any other model is it's not about the stories, the personal stories that happened and that led to that model, but what do we do with the story? What does this story give us as clues, as points of repair, of reference, in order to construct or to reconstruct in a different way the way we approach to that story? So for me, it's very interesting. For instance, in this case, as they are saying, this first image that appeared is this idea of a table, of a family's table, and something that is on the surface, everything that we talk, everything that we eat, everything that we say, and everything, all the things that we don't say, that we put on there. Sometimes human beings, sometimes stories, sometimes secrets, sometimes ways of seeing the whole universe. And so this coexistence between like these two levels and all what is happening there, if you can see, there is a whole universe that is happening there that is in another kind of layer, in another kind of floor or space with the other one that is present under the table.
And I've noticed that you have pretty much set the stage on the table, and under the stage, there's a rich environment, extremely rich, organic, multi-formed, and it's as though what's really interesting is underneath the stage. It's what's pushing up. It's like, what is the painting by is it Diego Rivera? You know, where there's like the whole underworld that's underneath the factory. People are basically slaving away and working. So this is the image that came to mind. I'm very curious to hear. All of you are basically very physical beings, trained as an actor in the Lecoq tradition. So actor, clown, physical performer. Alejandra, trained as an actress. You taught theater as well. You're a performer. Aviera, you're an actress. Milena, you're an aerialist, a circus performer. So you master your bodies in performance. And yet this was an exercise in which the body was projected onto objects. How was that? I'm very curious to hear, the process, and did you let anything go, or au contraire, did you find new sense of meaning through this externalization? Who would like to start?
I think the body, in my case, it's my primitive form to connect things and my intuition. And Pablo worked with the body very with training and exercise that we can meet each other in another way that is not an intellectual way.
So you started with physical work. in the
Yeah.
workshop. Okay, could you describe that a bit?
It's very simple exercise, but the complexity I think is to connect with your body in the present, for be in the moment, and that is very, I think, a treasure right now in the in the society we live, that we have a moment. So that we need it. That is very. I think it's impossible to connect in this work if you don't have that work with your body and the training and all that. So I think it's very when I say that the process is very clear. I mean, it's very clear le chemin, the pathway you can through. And
Well, actually, the first day we moved,
Yeah,
basically.
basically.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
We started working with, as Javiera says, with many simple exercises that start to become a bit more complex, and it's a work based on memory. They are invited to work with 3 specific memories, for instance, and through that, creating a choreography, creating through transposition a whole universe of movement by erasing somehow the illustrative part of that memory and bringing that into pure movement that at the end of the day will be shared and danced with the others, and by mixing all these different proposals, new forms will arrive that will somehow divert and create new choreographies, new internal choreographies of what they have proposed, in order to go to the second day, to this other aspect that is the body of the object. That for me is also very important to have this notion of many different bodies coexisting. The personal body, the social body that is somehow bringing a discourse, a speech about what is correct, what is not, what do we have to do, what is today being a woman, a man, a young, an old. So all these kind of labels that we have today and that we need to detach and that we need to deconstruct in a way to be able to reimagine our perspective. And then how through renewing this vision, we can arrive to attribute, to behold through the objects, a metaphor. That is something that many times, and we know it very well, the body of the interpret cannot even hold personally, but
Right.
transferring that through the object, through a puppet, through a real object, something about the metaphor, about the distance, about the humor starts appearing in a playful way, which is very important for communication with the audience also.
Right, so this idea of the metaphor is interesting in the sense that the body, so if I understand well, the body can be a figure, can be, can enact, can channel, can carry, but you're seeing the object, the objectivization of this memory as creating a possible metaphor. What is the advantage of creating that metaphor? What is the function of the metaphor?
We could be talking about this space for decades, about what are all the stories that a family, that a society, that a culture put under the table. And words sometimes are not enough. But this image,
Yeah.
I think it's an image that can talk to almost everyone. We all have stories under the table. We all one day took something from under the table and said, "Whoa, what?" And we got surprised. And this is not just a personal body, but a collective body.
Yeah.
We as cultures do this. We as families do this. We as nations do this. And And I think that is very interesting in this specific time, historic time that we are living today, where things that were for decades and centuries under the table are starting to sparkle, to come out. And we need to face that. And we need to understand how to deal with that as a common body, as a social body, not just as a personal body. Okay, this is me, myself, and I do what I can with this story, and help yourself.
Okay, and what is the next step? So you worked day one on physicality, on exploring individual memories, creating a certain fusion, if I understand, of these memories. Day two, you focused on the actual maquette construction, so the externalization. Now you have a maquette that I was told was not finished, but it will be an ongoing work. And Alejandra was still working on it a few minutes ago with the glue. What's next? Is explaining the maquette something important in the process for the performers, or do you rather leave the maquette and leave it to interpretation? I'd be curious to hear, how you would explain it, if this is important to explain, or rather, how would you guide us through this experience? I'll open this up to one of the participants.
I was telling this morning to Javier that it would be great that after this moment that we are, this momentum, we could create more momentums, and those momentums can be continuing this maquette or whatever can comes from that. And yeah, that's what we really enjoy, the possibility rather than as we discussed, rather than the presentation, the possibility of having this universe that can be your universe, or my universe. It's so open also to be completed by the audience's view. So what I imagine after this would be, I don't know, like staging the maquette and having our bodies putting or adding more layers of I don't know, of metaphor or whatever we decide to, I don't know if you want.
So when you say layering the meeting, additional meetings onto this, do you sense that your initial contribution has been absorbed into the maquette? Yes. Could you individually present the maquette in completely different ways and different readings of it, most likely?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what I like about what you were saying, Alejandra, is that you're not seeing this as something in the past, something that's guarded. You're seeing this as a place of possibility. Mm-hmm. Milena?
Well, yeah, like having this time together, it's like opening the doors for something collaborative that we can, develop from now to the future. So since we are like now meeting each other in this way also, like not only, okay, now I know Javiera and Ale and Gabi, and Bonnie, who was not here, but this is sharing those stories, intending to create something else that is not only ours. It's something, it's ours, but also to the others, So that's it, opening the doors to create something collective with someone who might be interested to get into it too.
Might there be a bit of not a danger, but a sense of loss? So for instance, if you have a number of participants coming in with significant experiences, some of them traumatic, some of them significant but not necessarily traumatic, have you been in situations, Pablo, where you do this workshop and there is a clear sense of loss on the part of participants, where or is this a case where you encourage them to build their own maquettes and go sort of deeper into their own creative process? I'm curious about this because when you work collectively, you also create a collective voice, a collective discourse.
Sure. As we were saying, sometimes the maquettes, the models are individual and sometimes are collective. This was a choice that we had. And it has also to do with the context. It depends on the context. Some of the contexts are very trauma-based contexts, for instance. So what I do and what I used to do, this, for instance, started to be a process that we started with the Association Française des Victimes du Terrorisme, the French Association of Victims of Terrorism, that are people who lived Bataclan, Charlie Hebdo, Nice, all the attacks that we know. So at that time it was very important to be together with a psychologist and people coming from the clinical case to accompany that, to share the experience with me. And finally, I decided to be trained as a drama therapist, so that's what I did in the university, in order to be also capable of homing, of sheltering in a way these different dramas that happen. But so what's happening today is that people from different contexts are coming to create models and coming to see. So to answer as well to the questions that you had, which is important to narrate the model? Yes, for me it's very important to narrate the model, because there is something about this contact that is happening. If you see someone, if you have someone in front of you saying, this is something I would like to tell you, not necessarily about myself, about my story, but about what I did with what happened. So that is something that for me is also something that can flourish after in the spectator's universe. And as they were saying now, it's also like a trigger of something that can be also something that they can share later. This energy, this momentum that we were talking about is something that is not just about the model, but about what is happening besides the model, this kind of link that has been starting to emerge there, and that perhaps brings the will or the volunteer of sharing another space or keep constructing together. And for me is it the tool that we today as artists can give to the societies in terms of bringing the necessary and the pertinent questions and trying somehow to retouch, to reconstruct the broken bridge between these different universes, to recreate in a way this social tie, the social bond.
And so the maquette you use trigger, let's say catalyst, because in North America the term trigger often will mean sort of triggering bad memories, or negative emotions.
A catalyst.
But it could also be that in certain cases, it could actually trigger,
Sure.
Extremely difficult emotions.
The things that are under the table, how do we deal with that?
Right. And you train as a drama therapist. So what does that mean concretely? If you're in a situation in a workshop where you're wearing your creative hat, creator's hat, and you're mentoring people through a process, but you're also extremely aware, I'm sure, of what is going on, what is simmering underneath. How do you tend to this?
Well, for me, it's very important to understand all these different layers that a person is bringing to the table when he's starting to deal with all these stories. So the first thing that for me is central is to create a safe space. And this safe space has many different aspects. One of them is confidentiality.
Right.
That's central. What is happening in the space is happening in the space. And so you have all this group holding this sacred fire in a way, that is people bringing part of their lives in a painful and in a fantastic way, and at the same time the fact of not just creating this direct link, but through the fact of creating together, which is something we've done since the origins of the humanity. We hunt together, we wash together, we sing together, we dance together, we turn fire on together, and by doing that, we tell our lives together.
Right.
We tell stories to our kids to sleep every night in the cave and every night in the apartment and every night wherever. So through the action of finding this metaphor, this object in between, we can keep constructing lives together. And that's for me the most therapeutical thing. Drama therapy is a way of art therapy, and that takes us to the important question of, does art heal? And that's a huge conversation, but what I can say is, through the fact of approaching aesthetically to a reality, there's a space, there's a breath that is created, and this breath is very healthy. This breath is very necessary to reapproach to a personal and collective story.
The notion of art healing is huge. We had talked, Pablo, you and I, last winter in French about the notion of l'art qui soigne, l'art qui accompagne, art that is sort of helping along, not healing per se, but helping along in the process towards healing. So
creating the possibility.
Creating possibilities, but also creating a space for us to explore safely, confidently, but also truthfully. So you mentioned earlier that it was important to dive in and to describe this. So if the participants are willing, I would like to hear how each of you would describe this. And maybe there's overlap, of course, but I'm curious to hear your interpretation of this piece. And please feel free to express this in whatever language you like, and we'll translate, because talking about one's artistic process is difficult in a second or third language. Who would like to start? Alejandra, I can feel that you're reaching for that microphone.
Well, actually, that's a difficult exercise, but we were, well, to me, this is, as we mentioned before, this model talks about secrets, talks about those moments where there are voices outside, a lot of voices that make you go under the table and just be there and listen and maybe be scared of what you're hearing, and then how there you can find or make your own universe. And it can be represented by animals, it can be represented by people, it can be that, when you're under the table, you have the possibility to create your space, but also the question, what happens when you go out of the table, not under or on the table, but when you are outside the table. So to me, that's that. And we were also talking a lot about natural spaces and what's going on with the mining in our countries, and what's going on with our territories in terms of also how nature now is perceived by humanity. So all those things were part of our discussions, and I think somehow we wanted to also put those ideas there. That's for me.
Thank you. Javiera?
Well, we have an image from childhood when children they are under table and he can play and they hear the conversation of the adults but in the under the table, that's all the possibility of the play and the universe and nature, and that is very powerful in the workshop for me, for example, because I go in my childhood very I don't know, it's like a flash, and that emerged and came, and we talk about it, and it's very nice because it's a very safe place. So you can have the possibility of felt, and felt that's heal, I think. And well, the table is the reunion, the adults,
Okay.
and and that's many characters that it's not like the authority, the topics you can talk about it, like politics and secrets and all the stuff, but you have always your universe under table that is more safe, I think.
Thank you.
Yes, maybe I'll just add something, some things that on what Javiera just said. That okay, this table can be like filled up with adults discussing things, but can also be a place with a lot of silence, with a lot of stuff that you don't talk about, and we try to remember so many things that we cannot talk about around this table, like politics, like soccer, like, you know, those things that also happens in religion for sure. And well, under the table can be this place of hiding, but also a place where you can, imagine your own universe and create what the silences leave behind. And now, well, I was just like looking at it, and well, it's like this place under the table flows with the river, and this other place, it's just there, like stuck. I was imagining that what we take care of here and here. Those images that
Right.
were in my mind.
So on the table you have a checkered checkers set, which is strategy and an intrigue, and underneath there's something absolutely organic. And I really like what each of you have said about this, a space of hiding, but also a space of refuge. Under the table is where Michel Tremblay, our famous Quebec playwright, spent much of his childhood, he said. And he was the child under the table, listening to the women's conversation, taking notes, and eventually describing that and writing his plays. So it's a pre-theatrical space, right? What's next? You initially, when we first started this conversation, you said this is a space of possibility, and we want to continue. How would you continue this, and where do you imagine going with such a collective maquette?
Oh, I don't think we have an answer right now. But for sure, we will talk more about this topic, and
Right.
maybe meet more times to discuss about that, for sure.
Okay, thank you. And Pablo, maybe to conclude, so this is the first of many activities that you'll be conducting here at Concordia. So we had this intimate maquette workshop over the weekend. This afternoon, there's a panel discussion with artists, basically that you selected. When we first started discussing the possibilities of continuing a conversation, it was very clear you wanted to bring in other voices. You wanted to enter into a dialogue. And so at 1 p.m. we'll be reconverging here with visual artists, with circus artists, people from Ghana. We have First Nations artists as well, yourself. So this is going to be extremely rich. Friday, you've got the opening of your gallery show at SBC Gallery, where you will activate the maquette that started it all, basically. So I'm looking forward to that. And next week, we have the world premiere in French and in English of 52, a show that grew out of the maquette experience. Maybe just a few words to sort of talk about like how this maquette has brought you back to performance, and we'll conclude.
Yeah, it was interesting for me to create this first model that was, as I said, built in the most emblematic concentration camp of the Americas that had become a museum. And at the beginning, I was in front of like a museography structure and invitation, but I belong to the scene, so I wanted to keep imagining like a theatrical version of that. So once the 80 Bullets in the Wing, the original model that I created at that time with Julian Teubal, a very good friend and artist, after that time in France, I thought that that was the moment to create this theatrical version that I was longing. And so I started talking to Daniele Finzi-Pasca, which is a huge director, friend, and a person who I've been working with for many years, to understand if there was a theatrical possibility. And we decided that we could create a show together. That is a solo that I perform based on this kind of quest around models that is called 52. And this show is now being presented. It has been created in Italian last year, and now it's starting to tour. So we came to Montreal to Sinard, and so to present it in French and in English next week. So it's going to be very nice to be here once again performing in Montreal. And I don't know if we have some questions or from the audience, if there any chance, or I don't know, otherwise we can say.
Yeah, are there any questions? No, so we're good for questions. And I'd just like to emphasize how much you're doing right now. So you've got the workshop, you're setting up the maquette in the gallery, and you are learning the French and English versions of the play that you created in Italian.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being so generous with your time and you know, coming here and sharing these experiences. Thank you all to the participants,
Thank you very much.
present and not quite hi Gabriela. Gabriela has shown up in the audience. And we'll see you at 1 p.m., Pablo, with our panelists.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, Pablo, and everyone for coming in. Thanks, Patrick, for being here to engage in this conversation. That was really great. And thanks, everybody online, for applauding. You didn't chime in, but we're so pleased that you were able to join us and listen in this way on YouTube or on Zoom. All right, folks, we're going to close up right now. And as Patrick said, we'll be back in this virtual space and in real time as well at 1 p.m. with Pablo once again for a different conversation. Until then,